welcome back to the program. This is Daybreak on Trust TV. Thank you very much for staying with us. It's time for us to unpack and bring you up to speed with our conversation this morning as we do a deep dive on what has been a very interesting talking point nationally and internationally following the delivery of that judgment by the Presidential Election Petitions Court that is still reverberating across Nigeria, across the continent, and you can still imagine across the world, because Nigeria is, of course, an interesting talking point for the international community. And our politics, our democracy, also doubles that interest in kind. But of course, it is a conversation that would further delve on the review of what has happened, the few takeaways, not just the legal points to be made, but also understanding its impact on our electoral process vis-a-vis our young and thriving democracy. What does this mean for Nigerians going forward, especially knowing fully well that the process is not yet over, especially since the petitioners involved, the PDP and the Labour Party, have just declared their intention to further pursue legal action at the Supreme Court. So there's a lot more to come from the fallout of the Petitions Tribunal's verdict. But of course, we also have a variety of other litigations from the 2023 general elections here in Nigeria. And to help us understand some of the angles as well as navigate some of the talking points, joining us on the program is Dengiyefa Angalapu. He is a research analyst at the Center for Democracy and Development. Good morning to you, and thank you very much for coming on the program. It's good to talk to someone who is not a lawyer on this particular development, because we've heard so many legal points of view, dissenting viewpoints about all that has happened. I'd like to get your take as someone who invested a lot of energy and resources covering the elections, for instance, from your civil society point of view. Give me your 2 cents on the judgment first and foremost, and what you make of the arguments for and against the judgment.
Well, first off, if you look at the Nigerian electoral system, it is a bit now unfortunate that it has become a norm that you prepare for elections, you prepare to contest elections. Afterward, you also move on to contest the results. So basically, we are now having two contests. So you see candidates, preparing, spending resources, galvanizing people to go into the electoral process. They also galvanize people, get a good legal team, to go into the court contest. Well, the electoral tribunal process for so many were disappointing. I mean, for so many it was fulfilling. So we have to strike the balance between the fact that some people are happy with the judgment and then some people are also not happy with the judgment.
Which is natural, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, very, very, very natural in any process. But there are fundamental issues, really. And if you look at the court judgment processes in Nigeria, you will notice something. And for the worry of many of us, I mean, there is an interrelationship between politics and law. And, we had felt that the law would, bring about stability. The law would, will be interpreted in a way that makes sense to the common man, But what we have seen in Nigeria in many cases is the precedence, the elevation of technicality over the substance of the cases. And that's where the problem lies, When you see a situation where the law is interpreted in a manner that the common man do not really understand. So you see a situation where someone will tell you it is based on these technical issues, you did not file this case on time, this was supposed to be a pre-election case and all of that. What if it's a serious national issue that we need to deal with? Something that, that speaks to corruption, something that speaks to, non-adherence to the rule of law, non-adherence to procedural means of dispute settlement or electoral processes. You are saying because it is filed late, you will not, you will strike that out. Don't we say better late than never? Really. So, I mean, for the court processes, these things are not so. So you can see, of course, you can remember, think of the Bayelsa elections where we had David Leon against Doye Diri, and of course that election held. The APC won the elections, and there were widespread celebration across the state. And just some few hours to the inauguration, I mean, the court made that decision, and then and brought the PDP to power. I mean, if you were in that state, you could see that widespread cold, that sadness across the state, because ultimately the courts do not elect leaders for people. Citizens elect their leaders, right. And the court processes must have to respect that role.
But also, aren't we dealing with a very complicated situation here, where the technicalities are important also, because they are the parameters that define what is right, what is lawful, what is applicable, and all of these things. They are the frameworks that define our system, whether it's the electoral system itself, whether it's the constitution itself, because these provisions guide our operations as a society, isn't it? So there's a lot of talk about what you just said right now. We're echoing the fact that people feel, or people are expressing this fear, that justice has been sacrificed at the altar of technicality. But the technicalities are also important, isn't it, as far as jurisprudence is concerned?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Technicalities are really important. We must necessarily follow the rules. But you see, there is no end to technicality. That's the point. There is no end to technicality. There is always a way where you can bring in technicality to strike out a case. I mean, that's what I've noticed. Because, sometimes you see that one thing about the law court has always been the fact that you can always say there is a precedent, and then the higher courts will follow that particular precedent. But what we have also seen is the fact that for cases that are also very, very similar, you see courts striking them out based on technicalities. So it seems like that's now the ultimate excuse of the court to even push out substantial cases. So I am not in the clique of the learned colleague, as they would say, I mean, the lawyers. But I mean, I am feeling that we should consider the substantial issues along with the technicalities. So we will say, okay, fine. I think the substantial issues are correct, but on the basis of technicality, this is what is going to happen and all of that. But what I have seen is the fact that we completely, once you discover a technicality, you completely neglect the substantial issues involved, even if it's murder.
Yeah, but then again, I mean, in talking about how complicated this entire process is, we saw Nigerians become overly invested in the 2023 general elections for all the right and wrong reasons. Much of it is about identity politics, but much of it is also speaking to how underdeveloped the country is, structural issues like poverty, unemployment, insecurity that is bedeviling the people. And you saw the people troop out en masse significantly to vote for any of the candidates they feel was going to get the job done. But when it came to the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal and the court's verdict on this one, we saw a lot of emotional interpretation of the judgment. And we all know that the law does not take emotions into account. It takes evidence, it takes witness testimony into account, and that is all that really matters. What do you make of the need for Nigerians to square this circle around how the emotions do not necessarily translate into how the judgment is going to come out? Because the justices, with all fairness, did a very good job explaining into details why they arrived at XYZ verdict on that particular day.
Yeah, so we must get to understand something, and we must understand the fact that first, elections everywhere in the world it's a very emotional venture. People will invest emotions. I mean, you can't invest your time, your resources in something that you're not emotionally attached to. So people must necessarily, invest that emotion. And let's not also forget that Nigeria is one place that has been plagued with poverty, been plagued with insecurity and all of that. People want these things to change, and their only hope of survival now it's relying on the emergence of a good leader. So once that fails them, once that definition of a good leader does not come through, I mean, they feel very, very, very disappointed. But also, we must praise the Nigerian people, despite the fact that we invested so much. There were several emotions. I mean, they didn't take to the street, to cause post-election violence. That's also one credit to us.
Does that mean that we are maturing in a way?
Yeah, of course we are maturing. You could see our neighbors. You see what happened in Gabon, and now there is a coup. You see what happened in Senegal, where the elections are coming and then all of the controversies that are happening, you can see that. Don't also forget that in Niger, one of the reasons for the coup there is also because of the elections that they have and some of the controversies that that was brought on board. So we are definitely maturing, and we should give ourselves a pat on the back. Now, what are the issues? I tell people why we've had all of these disappointments in the court system. It is because the process has not been very transparent to Nigerians. Let us not forget, these were the same Nigerians that invested in 2015. And when Goodluck Jonathan lost, people accepted the result and went on with their life because they felt that the elections then were more transparent than we have now.
But also, Mr. Angalapu, a lot of people would say there wasn't a lot of fuss after the 2015 election because President Goodluck did the unthinkable. He conceded. And that pretty much lowered the temperature. It de-escalated all the tension that would have naturally accompanied the results being pronounced by INEC. Now,
why will you concede if the results are not obviously against you and you know that, it is difficult to contest this in court? It was not just Goodluck Jonathan that conceded, remember. That election was also one election that remarkably had very low presidential election tribunal. It was not only Goodluck Jonathan that contested the elections. But when you see...
But his body language sent a signal, isn't it?
No, it sent a signal because he saw the results and then he felt that, they were more transparent. They were very transparent. He saw that, I have lost and I have to congratulate somebody. But once you don't believe that you've lost based on the facts and what you've seen, why wouldn't you contest the process? That's the question. So the thing is that we saw an election where there was electoral violence in places like Lagos. We saw an election where people were basically uploading their face onto the IRF portal. We saw this kind of situation. We saw an election where the transmission of results was something that didn't happen as expected. Those kind of things will cause controversies. Now let me tell you something. You don't need to explain transparency to somebody. If you put a glass of water somewhere and then put it on the table and the both of us are seeing it, you don't need to tell me that's a glass of water. I can see, you can see. So why are you not explaining transparency to me?
Yeah, but then again, we have over 700,000 plus polling units, right? And it's safe to say that none of the political parties had every agent in every polling unit. Some of them came short. I think it was APC, it was PDP, and then Labour Party, as far as the spread is concerned. And you look at the explanations of the justices. I wouldn't want to oversimplify, the complexity of their task, but I reckon it is a very difficult thing to have to come to those conclusions. But they kept saying the petitioners failed to prove. Isn't that, at the end of the day, the bone of contention? Did the petitioners do a good job in proving that all of these irregularities could amount to invalidating the victory of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu? Because there is also this perception that Nigerians are prejudiced against the judiciary, that whether they did a fair job or not, whether they did a good job or not, Nigerians were only going to accept a certain result. And if it was not going to be that result, then they were going to blackmail or put a bad name on the judiciary and say, listen, the judiciary is bought and paid for, and that's why they're not going to give us justice.
Yeah, I must admit the fact that there were quite a lot of blackmail on the judiciary. We saw all of the eyes on the judiciary trending and all of that. But the thing is, we must also come to realize the reality of the Nigerian state. You've talked about about the many polling units that we have, and if you are going to contest an election as a Nigerian, as some ordinary Nigerians, will you be able to mobilize people to all of those places? Now the question is, why does INEC accredit observers across board? Why not let those observers be some kind of judge or even get evidences from those people? You saw how the EU reports came. The EU people were observers in this election. You see how the reports came, and the federal government outrightly rejected that observation. So the whole idea is that
the courts also discarded that report. But is it? Do you think the EU's election observer mission should have some sort of material importance or significance in this particular matter? Do you think it should count for something over what, say, for instance, our own election Commission has to say about this one?
We also had local observers, and it should count. I mean, if it's not counting, why are we investing so much money in accrediting observers and making them go to all the polling units across the country? They are
observers. They are not an authority on our election.
Yes, they are not an authority, but what they garner from the field, all the resources they spend on the field, should be relevant to improving our electoral processes. Because why we have observers in the first place is because we feel that INEC cannot be everywhere at every single time, observing every single processes, observing the security forces, observing the political party activities and all of that. So why would you accredit people, and then make them spend that kind of resources without making use of the resources that they bring back on board? That's the question.
Yeah. So you're saying the courts should find a way to admit opinions of observers when it comes to election jurisprudence. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, absolutely. Because
but where is it? Where does it place now in our Electoral Act, for instance? What role would it play when it comes to interpreting our constitutional provisions? Because at the end of the day, that's what the justices have to work with.
Yeah. So
what does the law say? Not what do the observers think, or what is their opinion about the elections?
Yeah. I mean, so if you look at it, and that is why many people are now becoming very dissatisfied with the judiciary. You see, the thing is, our Electoral Act is a work in progress. We've also now seen the loophole, where it now says transmission of results is at the discretion of INEC and all of that. Those are very big loopholes. So INEC can decide to transmit or not to transmit. But the whole idea is that, it's a work in progress. And if I see a situation where, let's say for the Center for Democracy and Development, where we deployed over like 5,000 observers across the country, there are specific details we have about these elections. And of course, if we read about our report, it is explicitly clear the challenges that the election management body faced, the challenges that the security agencies failed, the role that political parties actually failed to adhere to. So the whole idea is that if you are not using that data, that resources, who loses? The country loses, really, because we have spent resources, lots of money. I don't want to even talk about the money that was spent in terms of deploying people across all of those places. But if you don't use it, is it me that loses? It is a country that loses. So the whole idea is that this is a country that lacks data and statistics. So whatever data and statistics that we can have, to prove a point that will inevitably lead to the propelling of our democracy, we should do it. That's the point I'm trying to make, really.
Right. Do you see a silver lining from what has happened at the Presidential Election Petitions Court?
Yes, like I said, the first thing first, my kudos is to the Nigerian people, for taking to the courts, and also after the court judgment, despite the DSS warning and all of the warnings that we had, there was no violence that was recorded. It means that we are actually maturing. That is one thing. And also it's unlike the years past where tribunals would take a very long time frame to administer judgment. At least they've done that. And like you've rightly mentioned, and I also admit, it will not favor every single person, right? At every particular time, it will not favor every single person. But I am just worried about raising technicality over the substance of the case. So we are actually maturing, really. We are actually maturing, and should give ourselves a pat on the back. But it's a work in progress. Whoever that tells you that this is like the ultimate, this is like the how will I put it? This is like the destination is not really correct. It is not the destination. There's still a lot that needs to be done, because once you administer justice, if for example you bring up a leader through the court, the leader will not rule the court. The leader rules people, and there's what we call legitimacy crisis. Legitimacy is when I believe that you have the right to govern me, and when people do not think that you have the right to govern them, they necessarily have this civil disobedience against you, and it is difficult to galvanize them for development.
Yeah, that legitimacy crisis thing, we saw it on a global scale in 2016 when someone like President Trump came on board, right? Hillary Clinton did have the majority of the popular votes, but he won the Electoral College. And for the American system, that is what really matters, right? At the end of the day, you saw that march, people saying, he got there fraudulently, the Russia collusion thing happened, and we saw that dog his administration throughout the entire 4 years. Here in Nigeria, however, while you're right to point out the legitimacy question, there isn't enough proof to show at least based on what the Presidential Election Petitions Court ruled on, to show that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu did not win majority votes and should not be legally regarded to as a president. Have you seen, because obviously this is not just about the votes alone, there are petitions concerning his legitimacy to even run in the first place, whether it's eligible. There's, concern about forgery, about, his education, qualification, and things like that. There were issues around the nomination of his vice president, or his running mate at that point, Senator Kashim Shettima. There are a variety of issues attached to this one. So when it comes to the issue of legitimacy, which one do you think Nigerians are more concerned about at this moment?
I mean, all the issues are actually interrelated in one form or the other. So the whole idea is, like I said, nobody is completely illegitimate in terms of legitimacy, because there are people that voted for Bola Ahmed Tinubu. But my worry really is the fact that, if you look at the votes that Bola Ahmed Tinubu got, and then if you combine the votes of the PDP and the Labour Party, it is the majority. That's the worry. So, I mean,
but that's not how elections work, isn't it?
Yeah.
The Labour Party and the PDP are not one party.
No, they are not. But if you look at, if you observe social media and all of that, you will see that at this particular point in time, in court, they seem to be fighting a common enemy. So the whole idea is that
obviously, when you go to court, you're contesting against the winner, isn't it?
Yeah.
The Labour Party is not going to take PDP to court because PDP didn't win the election.
Yeah.
APM also is not taking Labour Party to the court because Labour Party didn't win. They're obviously going to, file their petition against the winner, which is APC and Bola Ahmed.
But in most cases, you also see that contestations between them. You still see like people pointing fingers at the APC, to the PDP and the Labour Party at some point. But you've seen that relax to a very large extent. Now the point I'm trying to make is that there is this vast majority of persons that do not believe. Do not believe, and they are Nigerians. They are also important. So the idea of a court or the INEC should have been a transparent process, a process that will make these people believe that, okay, fine, I do not like him. I do not like him, but I feel that from the evidences that have been brought on board, I think that we actually lost.
Is this not part of the problem then, that because of the emotions involved, Nigerians are not thinking clearly or objectively about this one? Is justice objective or is justice subjective? Because when it comes to elections, you witness violence or irregularities in 2-3 polling units, and in the entire election you have 200 polling units. Your perspective from the experiences you have in those polling units will be that the election was marred. However, 90% of the election was a success. Is that the case we're dealing with right here, that there might have been instances where there were some irregularities, where some results were uploaded wrongly because of the data that we have, where it was some images of some people, or blurred vision of the election result on the various forms that were uploaded to IREV in some of the cases, or in fact IREV not working when Nigerians expected it to work when it comes to uploading the presidential election result. Is there a lot of subjective perception that is being re-echoed right now by Nigerians? And the fact is that when you clear all the dust, you really look at the situation. No election is perfect, and that's what we have to work with. This imperfect system that we have right now, and build on it for the next election cycle.
Yeah, thank you. I don't like the fact that sometimes we make Nigerians feel as though that we are very, very difficult persons. No, we are not, really. We are not. When Nigerians see something that is good, they know this is actually good. And I also cannot deny the fact that a lot of subjectivity is being attached to it. Nobody was everywhere at the same time during the elections. They interpret it from what they see. But what is being expected is that INEC, if INEC had come out to say, out of this percentage of votes that were uploaded, this percentage were blurred, we couldn't see from these particular places. This percentage were the ones that pictures of different persons were uploaded. That's what transparency is. So Nigerians will now know, okay, this is the percentage that was clear. Let's even make the calculations based on this particular percentage that was clear. So the whole idea is it's an issue of transparency. Nigerians do not feel the process is transparent enough. So I am feeling that, elections are coming in November. remember, we have Imo, we have Bayelsa, we have Kogi, and these are elections that, by their nature, by the nature of how they become off-cycle, are elections that were very, very contentious and shrouded in lots of controversies. That's why they're off-cycle in the first place. So I'm thinking that, the big lesson for us is to begin to see how elections will become more transparent. Let's not forget that beyond the presidential elections, we also had different national elections, and if you see those ones, they are less contested. Why? Because people believe that the IREF failed for the presidential, but it didn't fail so much for the National Assembly. So the whole idea is that show these people that what you are doing is transparent. That was why you brought IREF in the first place.
Right. There's no argument there with regards to the transparency. And INEC's explanation is failing to convince a lot of people, because Nigerians feel that there was some sort of plan to misdirect Nigerians with the whole IREF thing, working for the National Assembly elections, for the gubernatorial election, but then experiencing some glitches on the biggest stage of them all, which is the presidential election. But also, with regards to the quality of our elections, would you say that 2023 was an improvement on 2019? Because in the build-up to the 2023 election, we also have experienced some off-season elections in Imo, in Anambra, not in Imo precisely, in Anambra. We also witnessed it in Edo, in Osun State, for instance. And INEC was adjudged to have done a good job, because we even saw practical runs of some of these things that were going to be adopted in the 2023 general elections. Would you say that, factoring everything that has happened before the general elections in 2023 and the ones that are coming off season now, that we will perhaps see INEC adjust adequately, that would perhaps give us an indication as to whether we're making progress or not?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I like the fact that you talked about the Anambra elections. I like the fact that you talked about the Osun elections and of course the Ekiti elections and all of that. So you've also seen that Nigerians have applauded INEC, in places where they've done well. So if you see the Anambra election, there were several claps from CSOs, several claps from different organizations and all of that. The fact that the Beavers worked so well, and I'm not sure there was any single organization that remarkably said the Anambra election was so flawed or so. I mean, they were basically all praises for INEC and all of that. So the whole idea is that you take up the good points, and our fear has always been that INEC do not, INEC has this very bad issue of crisis communication. Tell Nigerians the truth, what you can do and what you cannot do, and that is how you manage expectations. You don't tell me that things will work perfectly, and there were several meetings, several media engagement. They said, oh no, things will work perfectly, and you don't expect me not to trust you. I mean, I've trusted you. It's not a responsibility to live up to the trust. So elections are coming. So the whole idea is that we have to, make sure the election work. I don't even know how Nigerians will convince themselves really now to go out and then vote, because lots of people are saying because of the situations that we have, they won't go out to vote. But I encourage them, because it's really the right way to go.
We have to go, but in a few seconds, do you think that going to the Supreme Court will change Nigerians' perspective? Do you expect anything more from the judiciary with the Supreme Court coming up next?
Well, it will depend on the judgment, and really what I would implore Nigerians to do is that the law does not operate on emotions, like we've said, and of course already for me, I think the tribunal judgment already prepares the minds of Nigerians towards the Supreme Court. But what I would implore Nigerians to do is the truth is that if you don't want so much of your election cases to be in court, the best way to do is to conduct transparent elections, because it is when the transparent elections are not so transparent that the court now has a field day. So the court feeds on elections that are very controversial, because when it is very controversial, you need an independent arbiter to interpret the process. But when it is less controversial, people are more likely to accept the process. So for us, it is a work in progress. It is a work towards ensuring that our elections become transparent, so that it does not even get to the courts at any time.
Free, fair, and credible elections means very few and far in between legal cases after the elections. Mr. Dengiyefa Angalapu, thank you very much, as always, for an insightful perspective and insight to this conversation. Thank you very much for joining us on Daybreak.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you for coming.
Yeah.
All right, that's the conversation for now. We're going to take a moment's break. We'll be back with more on Daybreak on Trust TV. Join us again.